Very few people are capable of reaching their goals, and if those promises arise in delicate moments, they become even harder to keep. Between death, desire, and responsibility, Kyrie Irving became one of those few who achieve what they set out to do. His story proves it, and if you think you know it, stay, and I will tell it to you. Kyrie Andrew Irving was born on March 23, 1992, in Melbourne, Australia, and the reason that child arrived in the world more than 15,000 kilometers from the United States has a name and surname. Derek Irving, his father. Together with his wife, Elizabeth, Derek traveled to Oceania to play professional basketball after having been a star at Boston University. 2 years after the birth of his first son, the couple decided to return to America. Kyrie feels American and never thought about representing Australia.
Do you know anything about the Australian national anthem? Can you, Australians all let us rejoice?
I know nothing about it.
You don't know anything about it? Nah, damn, I was going to get you to sing the Australian national anthem.
I don't know.
The Irvings settled in New Jersey, where Derek buried his sporting dreams and began working to support the family. But 2 years after their return, they suffered a terrible loss. Elizabeth passed away suddenly due to multi-organ failure, and Dre had to take charge of everything, working full-time, taking care of his children, and in his spare time, instructing Kyrie in the art of basketball. Since then, it seems that for the boy, there is no other idol than that man.
Work 9 hours a day, a 9 to 5. He would divide the time up of working all day and then teaching me how to play basketball or dropping my sister off at dance class. He was really a super dad.
The lessons became increasingly intensive, always focusing on a particular aspect.
Growing up, my dad kind of laid out the foundation of a couple simple drills, combination stuff, just building up my moves and building up my repertoire.
If Irving is one of the best finishers in the NBA today, it is because in those times he trained every possible variation, repetition after repetition, all under Derek's tutelage. His skills grew, so he enrolled at Montclair Kimberly Academy. During the 2 seasons he spent there, he averaged more than 26 points, 10 assists, and 3 steals per game. Kyrie was the star of the program. Both he and his entourage decided he needed a bigger challenge, so he went to St. Patrick High School. At that institution, he transformed into a true prospect, with good averages and outstanding performances in games like the Nike Global Challenge and the McDonald's All-American. The young Irving was on the radar of many universities, but he already had a destination in mind. With the Blue Devils jersey, he played only 11 games, in which he averaged 17.5 points and 4 assists. An injury to the big toe of his right foot prevented him from completing the season, and although he returned for the NCAA Sweet 16 and scored 28 points, he could not prevent Duke from falling to Arizona. But the NBA was within reach, and Kyrie opted to leave the university and go in search of his dream, one he fulfilled on June 23, 2011. In the NBA, he continued his path to stardom. He was Rookie of the Year and MVP of the All-Star Game. In 2014, with the return of LeBron James to the Ohio organization, he could finally compete for the ring, and the reality is that he did not disappoint. After only being able to participate in 1 game of the finals in 2015 due to injury, in 2016, he was decisive for the most important achievement in the history of the Cavs. The team reached the grand stage with only 2 losses suffered in the previous playoff rounds, in which Irving stood out as the second offensive option on the roster. However, facing them were the Golden State Warriors, holders of the record for most wins in NBA regular season history and eager to defend the title won the year before. The favorites went up 3-1, and that was when James and Irving completed the most epic comeback scene in the NBA. They scored 41 points each in Game 5 to avoid defeat. LeBron held Cleveland in the 6th, and in the decisive game, Kyrie became immortal at the end of the road game, and against one of the best teams of all time, the point guard hit a game-winning shot that will be remembered forever for its context. Perhaps the most cinematic shot the competition has ever offered. Irving was a champion, and as his capabilities grew, so did his thirst for prominence. He felt suffocated by James's dominant presence. Curiously, at almost the same time, those statements began to emerge that would make him a constant focus of attention for off-court matters. In 2017, Kyrie said on a podcast that the Earth was flat. This caused him to receive numerous criticisms and mockery. Later, he retracted it by mentioning that he heard it in a YouTube video. That same year, he forced a trade that landed him with the Boston Celtics, a team that was waiting for a superstar who could lead a young group to the title.
When you have the unique opportunity of having special people and being a part of an organization like this, and they do everything possible in order to put themselves out there to make such a great thing happen, you're just appreciative, and I'm grateful. And I can't wait to get on the floor and to maximize my potential.
But Irving was only a superstar at times. His leadership faltered. Boston crashed in the playoffs, and although he promised to stay with the franchise, he entered the market as a free agent and decided to sign a contract with the Brooklyn Nets, something that made him public enemy number one for Celtics fans. Kyrie arrived at the franchise in the city where he grew up in search of a fresh start, but after a series of decisions that made him one of the most criticized and scrutinized athletes in the league, he started that stage on the right foot.
The battles that I thought I could battle through in the team environment, I just wasn't ready for. And I failed those guys in a sense that I didn't give them everything that I could have during that season, especially with the amount of pieces that we had. So my relationships with them personally were great, but in terms of me being a leader in that environment and bringing everyone together, I failed.
Declaring the following. The credit didn't last long. In Brooklyn, he lived through the most tumultuous moments of his entire NBA career, from 2019, when he arrived, until 2023, when he finally left. He became a constant subject of debate for his off-court attitudes, receiving labels like toxic and destructive, which he couldn't escape, even while displaying the best level of his career, because at the same time that was happening, Irving shined on the court. The problem is that he was rarely seen there. But let's go back to 2019. There he joined the Nets as the prodigal son, wearing the number 11 again to honor his father. Along with him arrived Kevin Durant, his friend and now teammate. Both had the objective of proving that the narrative about them was false, that they didn't need LeBron James or Stephen Curry to win a championship. But the problem started from the beginning. Kenny Atkinson, the coach of Brooklyn's resurgence, was fired at the request of the new stars. KD didn't play that season due to injury, and for the same reason, Kyrie played only 20 games. It was the moment the world was attacked by COVID, which caused the playoffs to be played in a bubble. The following year, already with Steve Nash as coach, immersed in uncertainty and still without a visible solution, the NBA faced one of its strangest editions. There were only 72 regular season games, and most were without an audience. In that context, Brooklyn went through the best campaign of their superstar project. They traded for James Harden to form the Big Three with the greatest offensive potential in history. Irving played 54 of those games and averaged 27 points and a 50-40-90 shooting percentage, thus becoming the 9th player to enter that select club. The franchise faced the playoffs with a single goal: to win the ring. They dispatched the Boston Celtics in the first round and were leading 2-0 against the Milwaukee Bucks in the conference semifinals. But in the process, they suffered injuries to Harden and Irving, and Durant had to manage almost alone to keep the result afloat. They forced a Game 7 in which KD was close to hitting a game winner, but he hit a two-pointer instead of a three-pointer, and the Bucks ended up advancing. No one knew it, but that would be the competitive end of the Nets. In the 2021-2022 season, with the vaccine available to governments, the NBA determined that each franchise would adopt the health measures imposed by their respective cities. In New York, there was a vaccine mandate that prevented workers from different fields from accessing their workplace if they were not vaccinated. Among them were sites related to the world of entertainment and sports. The Barclays Center was on that list. Like other athletes, Irving had decided not to get vaccinated, and without entering into the debate about what everyone thinks about it, the reality is that it cost him a large part of the campaign. The Nets first decided that he would not join the roster, but then they sought him out to play road games. The problem is that absence for personal reasons added to another Durant injury, irritated Harden, who saw the project begin to fall apart due to issues external to the game and decided to request a trade to the Philadelphia 76ers. Then there were two. Meanwhile, Kyrie continued with his attitudes and controversies, defining journalists on several occasions as pawns and puppets. Thus, a snowball effect was generated that increasingly bothered Joe Tsai, the owner of the franchise. There was even talk of the possibility of everything falling apart. In that same offseason, Kyrie had a player option for $37 million. But he could choose not to accept it to become an unrestricted free agent and move elsewhere. He finally decided to take it. Although the destruction of the group was already in sight, Durant tried to force a trade that ended in nothing because other teams could not offer what the Nets wanted. Within that request, the superstar informed Tsai that he wanted Nash and general manager Sean Marks fired. That is how they began the 2022 to 2023 season together, but on the verge of everything blowing up. In fact, after 7 games in which results were not positive, Nash was removed from his post, although it wasn't the only problem. On October 27th, Irving tweeted the link to a documentary that expresses anti-Semitic ideas. He did it while being a member of the Nets, located in Brooklyn, the district with the most Jews in New York, the city with the most Jews in the world. Facing a refusal to apologize, the franchise decided to suspend him indefinitely. That was when Kyrie published an apology on Instagram. Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, also intervened, who met with him and clarified that he did not believe Kyrie was anti-Semitic despite his mistake. The suspension lasted 8 games, but in the middle, Kyrie suffered a hard setback. Due to the anti-Semitic scandal, Nike, the sports firm that had him as one of its main athletes, decided to cut ties with him and discontinue his line of sneakers, one of the fans' favorites. Given this, Irving received support from colleagues such as, for example, Jaylen Brown, his former teammate on the Celtics, who came out to harshly criticize the company. Irving's return proved how good he is on a basketball court. The Nets won 18 of the next 21 games and established themselves as a force in the East, now with Jacques Vaughn as coach. It seemed that everything was running smoothly and that they would finally consolidate as a serious contender. The point guard was chosen as a starter in the All-Star game due to his very high performance. His 8th nomination in his career. However, Durant was injured again and Brooklyn began to fall. February arrived, and with it, the trade deadline. There wasn't much talk about Kyrie, but there was about KD, and even hypothetical moves by the franchise to reinforce the roster were mentioned. But on February 3rd, Irving was the protagonist again. Failing to get the contract renewal he wanted, he requested a trade to end his time with the team once and for all. He had the Los Angeles Lakers as his favorite destination, where his former teammate and mentor LeBron James was. But after so many conflicts, Tsai chose to move him anywhere else and not give him the pleasure of going to California as if nothing happened. The operation was executed with the Dallas Mavericks, a group that had just reached the conference finals but urgently needed another disruptive talent alongside Luka Doncic, the great figure of the roster. And in a matter of days, Irving's story took a 180-degree turn. Now he was in the West, but in Dallas, as a duo with a young superstar and an uncertain future, both from the game and contractually. There have been few players as controversial and talented as Kyrie Irving, a personality for whom it seems one should not adopt any stance other than extremism, love or hate. There's talk of his constant disrespect and toxic statements, but not so much of his donations and the work he has done in favor of women in sports and indigenous peoples, for example. There's talk of his undeniable talent, but not that in the last 4 seasons he played only 52% of the possible games in the regular season, or that since he left LeBron's wing to be a leader, he has not overcome the conference semifinals. No, when it comes to Kyrie, it seems that he cannot be analyzed with moderation. He is either a genius or a useless person. There's no middle ground. But if we observe the forest and not the tree, we will discover that neither of those two isolated concepts describes him completely. That Irving overcame a very hard childhood, honored his father's effort, and fulfilled what that boy from New Jersey set out to do on those basketball afternoons. Then, in the fight for that dream, he established himself as one of the most amazing creative talents in the NBA. That he was a champion with a legendary shot, and that he still hasn't known how to be a locker room leader. That at the same time he dazzled with his game, he has had positive attitudes, and others that are questionable and even toxic regarding non-sports matters, and that he will continue to be the most polarizing protagonist, even though perhaps we could define him as the perfect example that nothing in life is completely black or white, and that everything has nuances.